Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be doing an HSR&D cyber seminar, and the topic is basic research and preparation, and a bit more, some tricks of the trade with the SAS Grid. I'll be presenting it, Mark Ezzo, data scientist, VINCI SAS and BI administrator, and let us commence. Now, here's the focus of the seminar. We're going to look at how to best approach a project via the SAS Grid, usage of desktop SAS, or more specifically, hopefully non-usage of desktop SAS, limitations of not using grid resources, increased utilization of SAS Enterprise Guide, e.g. up here, available code generating wizards, and which are also a great learning tool, ETL, basic data preparation, and a little advanced data preparation also, basic analysis, and some advanced procedures. We're going to show you running R under SAS, which has become extremely popular. And many folks have converted from RStudio and native R to using the SAS Grid and R under the SAS Grid, and we'll show you why. And of course, any questions or comments. And you can do those dynamically if you like. Okay, basic assumptions about having a research project. We assume all paperwork is completed and approved, and if that does not happen, then there'll be no entries into Active Directory, and we cannot proceed from there. Even if I gave you permissions in the SAS Grid, you could not get to the project data or the project folders unless you have completed it and you're in Active Directory. So to that, Active Directory groups are created and populated with the correct individuals. It usually takes, when we provision, about a day for everything to permeate down. There are, about 50 plus VISNs in the VA. That's in the world of technology. That is quite a large number. We assume also data managers have created the appropriate tables of views, your source and default schemas in SQL Server, and have provisioned you with access to them. We also have to assume, and you will not get into the SAS Grid if we do not do this, the SAS administrators have provisioned the study in both metadata and grid storage. And hopefully, and this helps quite a bit in the research world, you have developed your hypothesis for acceptance or rejection, even if it's only implicitly. Essentially, for all you non-statisticians, it's an objective. You're trying to prove, A, that race and gender matter with a certain bit of data or protocol or whatever. So you have that's just a crude example. So you have to have something in mind to do, and essentially it's developed in the statistical world as a hypothesis. Okay, now this is an idea of a provision study. Once your study is provisioned, both in Active Directory and into the SAS Grid, for example, whenever you come up and you get into the SAS Grid, e.g., and you go into SAS app or whichever application server you want to go into, you're going to see things like this. This is Tim Troutman's bogus project here, and I just use as an example, ORD Percipio, default schema, source schema. Now, these will come up, and you will see in the metadata, SAS metadata world, these things that you're only provisioned for. Now, this also can be anything in CDW. For example, you may have CDW S-Staff or CDW Pool. You'll see all that come in also. So have no fear there. But this must be done before we can provision this for you. And what are the advantages of using the SAS Grid? We have an extremely robust environment of 3 compute nodes per grid, operations and research. The usage, our research is about 2-to-1 operations, which is to be expected. And good news is that we have provisioned and have purchased, and we have to install. We're going to install new blades, and they're going to have twice the power of the current ones. We currently have a lot of storage in the Windows world per project. You have, I believe, only 300 gigabytes on the project folder, your P or P2 drive. Now, on the SAS Grid, in total, we have 704 terabytes of storage. And obviously you can have at it there to your heart's content. However, we do police it. If we notice that the individuals are consuming 20, 30, 40 terabytes in a project, we will question you as to that fact and either compress the data for you, archive the data, or ask you to delete it if it's no longer in use. Another great asset of the SAS Grid is greater memory allocation per job. We have several application servers, which I will show you, and with various amounts of memory. For example, we have an R app and a SAS EM for Enterprise Miner app, and they have essentially 4 times the memory of SAS app. And the reason for that is because we use open source in there, and as you know, some of the limitations of open source is that they're completely memory intensive. They don't have the capacity to use a hybrid model of memory and I/O that SAS can do. Maybe sometime it will improve in that respect. We are in an enclosed Linux network, infinitely less interruptions, allowing completion of jobs reliably. That means that we have less to do within the grid itself with the Windows network handshake that most people need. Now, we have that with Enterprise Guide, and if you leave your applications up too long or overnight, there's a chance that you might get interrupted Enterprise Guide, which is why we encourage using SAS Batch, SAS GSUB, for any overnight jobs or very long jobs. We have right now, and this may or may not increase, 3.7 terabytes of workspace per compute node. That is what I alluded to previously. When SAS feels that you're running out of memory or that your procedure that you're doing is using too much memory, it will break it all off. For example, if you're doing a select distinct, it may put that in the I/O world rather than the memory world. What is the advantage of that? The advantage is you're not overtaxing memory, and you're not slowing down jobs or even halting jobs of you or other individuals. There's additional security. Not only do we have the Active Directory security, but we provision people in SAS metadata, and we can control what you can see or not see within the grid. And we can make groups and add the appropriate users per the designation of the PI. And that has been very effective. It's a very secure model. It adds an additional level of security. And, of course, we're using SAS's award-winning UIs, user interfaces, both SAS Enterprise Guide and SAS Enterprise Miner. I'm probably not going to show you too much of Enterprise Miner today. Probably not a bit at all. I've given seminars to that, and it takes quite a while to really go through what's necessary for that. But let's just say that it is something that is icon-driven. Essentially, you select icons, put them into your display, and fill up the parameters, and off you go. I'll gladly do an Enterprise Miner seminar at some other time. And we also have, which is another huge advantage, dedicated SAS and Linux support staff. Advantages of SAS Grid versus what is essentially, since SAS 9 point whatever came into being, is obsolete and should be deprecated. Desktop SAS is obsolete and has not been updated since the SAS 9X inception. It will never have another update. And every time we get Windows updates, which happen frequently, then it becomes even more deprecated, meaning that you're going to run into more and more issues. It's not nearly as robust, does not nearly have the memory that we have on the grid. It's just the wrong avenue to be in. SAS, honestly, I wish they would allow it, but SAS allows desktop. SAS is a courtesy, and I think eventually we are going to deprecate it within the VA. It has very, very few programming aids as opposed to SAS Enterprise Guide, so you're essentially just mostly programming. It has very few wizards, though there are a few. And for budgetary purposes, on desktop SAS, there are no SAS stat procedures available, meaning all you can do are very basic things, maybe a little bit of data preparation. You cannot do any regressions. You cannot do any survival tests or analysis, etc. You essentially have proc means, proc freaks, proc univariate, and that's about as elegant as you're going to get. So in a nutshell, what we are coming to is, as a conclusion, don't use it if you can avoid it. And if you feel you're compelled to use it, please contact the VINCI SAS administrators, and we will show you how easy it is to migrate to the grid world. Advantages of SAS Grid versus open source. Now, when I say this, I am not deprecating open source in any way, shape, or form. I believe in open source. I think SAS and R and Python and Julia and Java are all tools you should be throwing into your toolbox. I've heard people argue about which one is better, and to me, I think that's really an argument without any merit, because we have the ability to use them all, use what you're most comfortable with, and what fits the mission of what you're trying to do. However, having said that, the advantage of the SAS Grid versus, say, RStudio or native R or Jupyter Notebooks, it's a far more stable infrastructure and environment, and has many more bells and whistles, and will allow you to do much more analysis and data preparation than either R or Python at this point. It's an enterprise product. It can handle enormous amounts of data more easily. Much of what I see being done in the SAS Grid world these days is a lot of data preparation and analysis in SAS, and sometimes people will do analysis in R, and I see a preference for using R graphics, but I think that's because most people don't really understand the SAS graph wizard. And having said that, there's nothing wrong with R graphics. They're very good, and they're not that difficult to use. SAS, as we've discussed previously, is not memory reliant. Of course, you need memory, but if you run out of memory in a procedure, then it goes into the I/O world, and to really slow down the SAS Grid, you really have to put your mind to it. I'm not saying it has never happened, but when we've had some users on, maybe about 20 users who are running some aberrant R programs or trying to do some very sophisticated pH reg analysis, we can slow down, but the advantage of that is if one of the nodes is slow, then the SAS middleware, LSF, will switch you to another compute node. And unlike Windows products, which are linear, if we lose one of our nodes, then we do not lose the grid. We essentially will reduce to 2 nodes, but we're still running. It'll be a little bit slower, but it really almost takes unplugging the environment to stop the SAS Grid. We have proprietary technical assistance, meaning we can call, and you can call, SAS techs with issues. Will supply you with a number, and their people will reply to you within 24 hours or earlier. And that's very, very useful. I would say that as far as the industry, as the analytical industry is probably the best help, the technical assistance we can get. It's very easy to use because we use SAS EG, and there are wizards, of course, in the open source world. I believe SAS EG with their wizards and the essential UI, which we will see, is much easier. We have the implicit wizards, which allow you to, without knowing SAS, just fill in parameters of what you want to do. And one of the more beautiful things of it is it can create code, and you can save that code and either A, learn how to use and code natively with SAS by viewing the code, or B, once you have a successful task completed, you can use that in a macro and just incorporate it into anything else that you're doing, into your whole process. And we'll see that as we go along. We can combine SAS with open source successfully. That's been very popular in the VINCI world, and is increasing so, and that's one of the reasons why we have doubled our resources. And hopefully, and I'll allude to this later, we get our SAS VIA product in very soon, which will allow the hardcore data scientists to be able to combine within one venue SAS and R and Python and whatever else you wish to use. There are probably more coding examples available because SAS has been around since the 70s, and I do not know of anything that you are trying to do if you go out and Google and get into a SAS blog or a SAS help area or technical support. I find it almost beyond the realm of possibility not to find a solution very quickly. it has a massive user community. So this is also true of most open source. So everyone's out there helping each other. You can get your SAS expertise or your Python expertise just going out into the Google world. And I say et cetera because we shall display it. Now let's discuss ETL, your data preparation. Whenever you're dealing with CDW, always, and I repeat, always use proc SQL pass-through when accessing SAS SQL Server tables unless they are very small. If you, say, get in the SAS app and expand your libraries and get it into your project, you may, for example, inpatient data or ChemLab data can be very voluminous. And if you double-click on that and you have not set your parameters correctly in SAS EG, you can actually wait quite a while for that to properly adjudicate, and it will consume a lot of resources. So if you're doing a data step combined with a set and your live name points directly to a table SQL Server, the detriment to that is before any of the culling happens, any of your program statements are utilized, it must bring the entire table or tables down into the SAS work area, as opposed to pass-through, which allows you to send your programs, your SQL programs, up to SQL Server itself, and it processes up there and only returns what you have programmed and requested back to either your permanent SAS storage or your work SAS storage. Now, this can cut off hours of anything that you are trying to do, and it's just more efficient all the way around. It returns only what you specify. It does not stress the system, and when the system gets stressed, it stresses other folks also. There are wizards that can create templates and teach you for ETL. There are many, many data wizards. You can do joining, merging, setting, culling, whatever, and we'll look at that. And customization can be added to any generated code. Essentially, once you have the code and you run it, you own it, and you can now start to copy portions of it, change portions, change the sources in it, like your lib names, etc. It's essentially at that point you own it, and you can just put it into the program area and do with it as you will. Now, having said all this, please consider space considerations and only save what is necessary. And I understand that there will be times where you're going to want to save 1, 2, 3, 4 data sets as you're working out the final data set for analysis, and that's fine. That's actually just an iterative part of research itself. But then when these are completed, what you want to do is delete those and just save the final data set. Now, when you're doing a large ETL process, and even within your program, you are having huge work data sets. Once they are completed within the program itself, you can run something, say, called proc delete, and that will delete that unnecessary work data set and free up the resources for you to consume further on. So if you're running something and by the end of the program it would be a couple terabytes of data in workspace, but you really only need 50 gigabytes, it's very, very prudent and will help you if you put proc deletes in the interim and have the ability to delete that data. Your code will run faster and the system will be less stressed. We can archive for you if you say, I have this data, I'm not going to be using it, I may not be using it for quite a while, but I want to save it while it's under peer review, or we may revisit this process within a year or two. We have the ability to archive it and back it up and retain it for you. And now let us do a quick demonstration. I have to get out of this mode and go up to here. And this essentially is, we're in the operations grid right now. Let me show you what that will look like. This is what your profile should appear as. I put operations grid up there, and you just say it's remote, and you put a description if you like, but it's obvious. Remote, and this is what you have to connect to. That's the metadata server. So in operations, it's VHA, CDW, DWH, SMD1. For research, it's VHA, CDW, DWH, SAS, MD2. but we're in the operations world, so we'll just do operations for now. And all you need to do is click Use Integrated Window Authentication. In VA speak, that is your PIV card. And it's essentially, it's a one-stop shop, and you will get into either VINCI or the operations client servers using PIV, and this just extends all the way down. And as we know, most people don't use their password. They don't even know their passwords at this point. So that's your profile, and that's how it should appear before you're able to use the SAS Grid. Okay? And, of course, you can set up many, many profiles. You can even set up a profile locally. And as you can see, you can run things locally. And if what you have is completely on your Windows drive, you could just use the local application server and run there. Now, as I said earlier, we have several application servers. And the main ones are, as we see here, local for the local client, our app. What that is all these application servers are virtual. I create these internally and set them up and set up the security for them and the configuration. Now, our app is R compliant, and if you're running our scripts on here, you need to use either our app or SAS EM, Enterprise Miner. And these are both memory enhanced because, of course, as you all know, open source is far more memory intensive. And the main one that everyone has access to is going to be SAS app. That has less memory, but it's still quite robust. Have no fear. And as you can see, when you get in these, you'll see the green check mark, and files and libraries will appear. Now, for example, I click under our app libraries, it's going to show me all the libraries that are available to me. And as I said to you previously, we have libraries even in CDW, not just project libraries. Now, how do you understand the properties of a library? All you merely need to do is right-click, go to Properties, and it will show you all the connection information. You'll see an explanation here, general dimension tables for CDW, and it shows you it's on A01, the server name, our app. Of course, we're running SQL Server. And it shows you the options, like the schema here is dim. So if you're going to do SQL pass-through, you want to say, and you want to use a table, for example, you're going to have to say dim dot. And it also shows you that we have a very large read and insert buffers. We defer the connection until we need it. The connection is global, and a few other things. And then if you want to know what the name of the library is in SAS, you just come down a little bit, and it says libref cdw_dim. Now there are, for example, smaller tables in the CDW and the dim world, and you could use your live names there. But in most projects, except for like cohort and very, very small tables you may create in your default area, that most of the source data is quite large. So I do not encourage using a data step and a live name in that regard. So that's how you can get some information on the tables. You see that we have several libraries here. And in this case, we show certain things like the SAS library, SAS help, SAS user, the work lib. So if you create anything, it will be in the work lib. In SAS user, you'll see nothing unless you create it there, and we only see what's available. Now, the other bit under it is files. So if we expand files, it shows us essentially the main areas, which are admin, grid share, which you will have access to for your login only, and that's where we run a lot of the SAS batch. And so we have grid share, and if I open that up, you'll see that there are a lot of people who have used it, including myself, and that is the batch world. Now we can also see that we have ops, and you know that if you have an ops project, you just go to wherever it is for, etc. That's a bit different in the research world, and we can have a view of that a little bit later. But there are all the ops projects under there. But regardless, if you want to see your files regardless of the venue, you can go and look at the files. Now, having said that, you may also wish to use WinSCP, which is an excellent product, and it allows you to, essentially, the left side is Windows and the right side is Linux. So if I, for example, log on here, and I just put in my case, I'm on my admin account, but all you merely have to do is type this in, OITSAC, EZOM0, hit OK, and in this case, it's asking for a password. Oh, I take that back. I am not on my, this shows a good lesson. I am not in my domain world. I'm actually in my admin world. I am in my domain account. So all I need to do is put this in, hit OK, and it comes up. And this is the area where I make a lot of the grid reports. But the cool thing about it is, on the left side, if I wanted to, for example, move a PDF file over, I just merely need to do this. If I wanted to move something back, just slide the other way. So it's a point-and-click environment and very, very useful. And you can open things up, and you can I could spend probably an hour just showing you all the things we can do with that. Most of you are familiar, and if you have problems configuring it, the SAS administrators will gladly give you a hand in that regard. So let's take that out. Now, this essentially is an enterprise guide project. And what it has is process flow and several programs that we have created under the process flow. And as you see, it shows icons, and I can actually start somewhere and just say run from here, and it would. You can do a few ways. For example, some of these are just merely programs, and I'll show you these as we go. You can also set your options up here, and this is very powerful. Your startup options. Check for updates, your configuration, general, project and process flow. You control this. If you have an auto-exec process, you can just click automatically run that when I start. And an auto-exec process maybe something is where you configure your environment. You set up your live names, you set up macros, whatever. Auto-recovery, because we do a lot of recovery here in case something happens. We enable auto-recovery, so if the server dies or you incorrectly come out or there's network interruption, it's going to save it to an area, and you can see where that area is here. Now results, this is very important. You can set up your results, which will happen automatically. I choose to always come out with HTML, SAS report. For now, I can also come out with a PDF. So I do nothing as far as setting these up. I can also do RTF, which is essentially Word for now. I could do Excel. I could do a listing. I could even do PowerPoint. And I could just set them here. Or I can use the SAS ODS editor, and that stands for Output Delivery System, and just put code in that regard, and I would be good to go. Now, display results, display tab 2 result, and we'll see that later. That's essentially you have a tab of code, log, and results, and graphics, etc. And I can say how I want it to go. I can move focus to tab that is displayed. Display SAS log when errors occur, absolutely. Change SAS icon when warnings occur, show generated code wrapper, etc. I'll give you time to have a look at that. Now, I can also set and control, for example, we're using HTML5, which is a new HTML. Sometimes, depending, you may have a little problem with HTML5, so you can switch that back to just HTML, and you can control the style of how it comes out. I just choose HTML blue. You can also Configure your SAS report, same thing. You configure any of those we saw under there. You can configure your graphs, default, best fit for SAS, let SAS decide, etc. And you can make a stored process if you like. It can output results to a stored process. Now, what is a stored process? It's essentially code that you create that others can consume. You can essentially publish an icon in your project area and say, let's say you're doing a model and you have all the ETL in there, you have all the configuration, like the live names, etc. You save it as a stored process, and others within your group or whomever you decide to share it with are able to access that stored process in the SAS system. And we also, let's look at data. This is data, how we set up data, and how you can control it, number of default columns, yada, yada, yada. Take a moment to review that. And very important is performance. If I have, and this is format data locally if applicable, I always set mine to the largest value found within the data. Now this is incorrect. Always set to maximum numbers of rows to determine data attributes when importing data. I always like to say 50. Maximum number of rows in the data grid with the SAS access, I set that to 10,000. That's actually a little bit high, but 10,000 is very manageable. You can set it to 1,000, 5,000, whatever. And you can unlock open data after inactivity, and that's in minutes. Unlock all open data before running code, or automatically refresh open data after running code. All these are very powerful and very necessary. And then we have query. You can control your queries here. Attempt to join tables in query, validate query whenever changes are made. So this is very useful. Have a look at this. And one thing I'll say about queries, you have two types of queries. They're all SAS queries, but you have queries against SAS data, and say you can set up libraries to Excel or any Windows product. And then you have queries over to SQL Server 2. So be careful when you run your queries, but this will control how your queries look and what your queries are doing. OLAP data, we really don't use much of that. Here are tasks, and it just shows you, I like to say use proc SQL instead of proc sort for sorting in tasks. Proc SQL is a little bit more efficient in my mind, and includes SAS procedure titles and results. So essentially, you know what you're doing and where it came from. And then you can have SAS programs, which means you can insert custom code before or after. Initialize grid if available. We do that automatically, so you really don't have to worry about that. There's merging tools, version control, Git integration, for example, which you can do in operations, but not so much in research. We don't allow, the firewalls do not allow it. We have security. We mask our credentials. You can do a little bit of light administration. Transfer mode is binary as opposed to text. Outgoing and email SMTP. With that, we configure automatically. As you know, you cannot email from VINCI, but you can email from operations. Application logging, if you so want to set that up. So that are your options within tools, and I very strongly suggest you take a look at those and configure them as you like. Now, I always set I always set my program, for example, just to, if I do this and I say view, I always say standard, which means I deal with one for code and one for log. Now, it comes in, and I wish it wouldn't, it actually comes into vertical split. I personally don't like that because I don't like to have the code or the log cut off. So I always set it to standard. But having said that, feel free to use anything you like. And that essentially is how we go through, and that's Enterprise Guide. That's a pretty good primer for it. Now let's go back to our presentation. And let's put this back in. And let us continue down. Now, one of the powerful things in SAS and for SQL Server is the use of temporary tables. What does a temporary table do? The temporary table allows you to take SAS data and move it up, and it as a temporary table, and the key word there is temporary. When you end your session, when you end your SAS session, the temp table space up on SQL Server disappears. It's not saved. If you want to save it, you'll have to save it to a writable schema. And in the research world, that would be your default schema. You can save many things up there, and therefore you can use those as lead tables. But if you just want to use something on the momentary fly, like in CD work as we have here, this is something I actually did for a user, or we did simultaneously. Pardon me. She created a program called hip fractures with parameters, and then we set it up a live name, and I'll show you all this in actual code. This is the code we had brought up earlier. And if you look at this, this is a very easy way, and this method works in any remote database. So we just set up a libname, SQL Server. We have our data source, and data source is in the ODBC ini file, and essentially tells SAS and the Linux world where the data is, what server it resides on, what the database name is, and a few other items. But without this, you cannot connect to SQL Server. And in this case, we just put in a simple read buff of 5,000, insert buff of 5,000. But the really important aspect of this, all you need to say is dbmstemp equals yes. Now that gives me the ability to create a temp table in the area I define. In this case, it's CDW work on CDW, VHA CDW A01. And then I just say data, AAA, up 1, which is my libname, and I call it ICD-10KM, and I set as the hip fracture thing I created here. So now I have a lead table, I have a temporary table up there, and I can run proc SQL against it. And I create a temporary work table called ICD-10_hip, where I'm selecting A, just the ICD-10 code from here, my SAS data, which I've made a temp table, and I interjoin it in the CDW-DIM ICD-10 on ICD-10 code from my temporary table I created, connecting to ICD-10 code up in CDW. So I essentially have a lead table where I can limit what I want to see and connect it to production data, CDW data, and there I am. I now have a work data, HIP10, and I can also do this with something else, create a table out fractures with all the information I'm looking for. Again, from this one, the lead table, interjoin on V diagnoses, and anyone who's ever worked with that knows the size of it. So any lead table or any way you can cull the data before you're downloading is extremely useful and effective. And so we run this, and we output our data here. Okay? That's version 1. Now there's another version, another way to do this. We'll page down, and we create a temporary table. And this is it's essentially the same concept, but a bit different. I am saying when I create this, A up, I'm creating, this is an error, it should be AAA up, and I'm creating something called My Sites. And all it is, I'm just keeping from my code, from SAS code, station 3N. So if we come back down, and we go back to our process flow, and I look at temporary table 2, you can see I'm creating, and let's change that now. I stole the code. Other code, I just forgot to change it. So if I say AAA up 1, I'm creating a temporary table called My Sites, which allows me to do as we did before. And in this case, I'm doing this within pass-through. So I create a pass-through tunnel, which I could just call simply tunnel, to CDW work, pardon me, data source CDW A01, which is the same as up here. And as folks, most of you know, Kevin Martin developed something called, which is very useful, SQL Optimal, which is a global macro parameter. And if you include that in your program, it sets it up so it gives you the most efficient environment to do SQL pass-through. And in this case, we're creating a table, work.test, and you can do a lot within in these tables when you create them. I can put where clauses, where patient, in this case, SID not equal to -1, and patient SID not equal to 0. I could have put just greater than 0, and patient SID is not missing. And it would be as select. Now we go to our tunnel, and let me reiterate that anything that you run in SQL Server SSMS, all you really need to do is put this wrapper on it, drop the code in, and it will run for you. And we select our variables, and to run against other tables, that's essentially is we're going in the CDW work area, and then Chem, Lab Panel, SC, we do a join outpatient, visit as V, and a join dim, locations, dim, stop code, and the final is I only want to see it for certain stations, so we connect to my sites. So all this is done, and it just filters it for my sites. And I put my normal where clause in, and I'm done. Now, that lead table, and doing it with pass-through, will remove, in this case, it probably removed 20-some hours of work when it was done just with data steps and set statements. So extremely powerful. There's two ways to do it, and if you ever have any questions, you can contact me via the, via VINCI SAS administrators, and we'll be glad to chat with you and help you out. Okay, so let us proceed. And we come down. And that's what I just showed you within the code. And now we can schedule an EG. Now you can schedule entire projects to run, and it's really just as simple as, I'm going to take this out of presentation because we're always jumping back and forth. If I have something here, and I just want to say do the process flow, and merely say, before I do this, start page, save, temporary save, yada, yada, yada. Or let's see this, move columns up. Now I have to save this as a project, and let me start something else. No, I don't know if I want to do that with time at the moment. Let's just say it's very simple in EG. Merely, and in this case, this is not the project that I was looking for. You merely right-click on the project and just say schedule, and a wizard will come up. And if I have time, I'll show you that very quickly. And speaking of wizards, let's come down. We have many wizards are available. You can customize them to create a template for macros, etc. And let's do a quick demo. Now, for wizards, we have everything here. There's ways to get it. You can either say view, tasks, which are the way you saw we removed this. So if you don't see them there, just say view, hit tasks, and you see your wizards here. And this can do many things. We have ANOVA, capability, control charts, data mining, describe, graph, multivariant, Pareto for the economist, Pareto optimality, regression, survival, time series tools. So let me move over to the other world. Let me sign into my other server. And in this case, I do this, and go down here. I'm going to sign in as an administrator account because I have things open already. You folks are probably more accustomed to remote desktop. This is essentially my remote desktop. It'll take a moment for everything to come up, meaning all your PID information. And while we're waiting for that, Here are some of the options you can see for examples for data. It allows you to append tables, compare data, copy files, create formats, create format out of the data set attributes, delete data sets and formats, downloading data files to PC, filter and sort. Anything you can imagine you can do with data, you can do here. You can even build a query. You can do random sampling of your data. Essentially, it's a proc survey select. Rank your data, sort your data, split the columns up. It's extremely powerful. Upload the CAS, which we don't have yet, but we will when we connect to Azure. And while we're connecting here, let me do this. And let me wait for login attempt. I'll tell you, it's a thing of beauty. So while we're waiting for that, let's look a bit more. You can do data mining. So you can do model scoring. Rapid predictive modeler. Essentially, that is very rapid. It's like a RAD application for predictive modeling. And I could spend an hour on that alone. Recency, frequency, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Now, you can also do very simple descriptive statistics, which you're all aware of. And you can do all the statistical. Now, the graphing, I know a lot of people, one of their largest complaints about SAS is the graphing. And if you're going to code it, I heartfeltly agree with you. But because we have wizards here, and we can show all that, the wizards will produce everything for you. All these here, for example, I go to my program, and I just say, let's say I run this code, and I'm making a very simple work data step of just where the stations are less than, I forget what I had, 458, 463. Okay? Then I come back to my process, and it comes out to agency, and then I do some statistics against them. So if I open this, this is what it would run. All that was created via the wizard. And it shows me my code that I created just by going to summary stats and filling in the parameters. And in this case, just that was in descriptive summary statistics wizard here. So I come into this. It will come up, and I just say I want to choose agency as my data. We open. And I see it confirms I'm going to be doing this on SAS app. It's work data. It's called agency. We go next. I can just drag and drop things over and run. I'm not going to, in a matter of time, I only have 15 minutes. I won't go through the whole thing. But this is as easy as it slides you. It'll prompt you. It'll actually assist you. And if you're trying to do something that is not feasible, it will stop you. So that's summary statistics. And this is the data that it creates, and this is the results. So if you have any questions about how to do something, then all you need to do is go into the wizard. Now that was, let's come back here, summary stats, and from the same area, I created a simple bar chart. It's an ugly bar chart, but it's a simple one. And again, it's done with the wizard, and it creates code for me. So if I'm not sure how to do it, I just go into the wizard and I run it, and I have my code, and I can learn from it, or I can incorporate that. Now I can modify the task. Just come here, go next. I have everything in here. I can just change accordingly. I can say agency. I could just say like station. I could change that to. And I could stack it by agency and change that, and I go next, and it just shows me a little bit of legend stuff. Finish, bar chart, and off we go. It's another ugly one, but I just wanted to show you how easy it is to change things with the wizards. So any questions you have of anything within SAS, you'll find within the task here. And of course, you're more than welcome to give us a call. Now, going back to the process flow again, you can also do line plots, and we'll just look at this very quickly. And there it is. You can run a simple line proc. Again, it shows you the code. And if I wanted to, I can just come back and modify the task. It's really immaterial what you're doing. It's all really the same structure of how to proceed. So we've shown you how you can do against data. We ran a program to get data, simple descriptive statistics, a simple bar chart, a simple plot, and how it's easy it is to just go in by clicking on it and hitting modify and outputting reports, which I could then download for publication if I so chose. And I can control the output quite easily within the code itself. So I very, very strongly urge you to use wizards when you have any questions. They're extremely powerful. And I'll give you a good example. When we had a lot of people go from certain products, like SPSS is a good example. When we were deprecating it because of the cost, and they converted over to SAS Grid, a lot of the SPSS folks were concerned about programming, and we showed them how to use the wizards, et cetera, and that, believe me, that alleviated quite a bit of stress, and they became very functional programmers very quickly. So let's go down. Graphs wizards, which we have showed you, are also available. Can generate results from publication of code for use in programs. SAS graphs via wizards is simplicity itself, as I've shown you, and can be accomplished completely without coding. No need to learn the graphics language, and believe me, you don't want to, and we've already had the demo. And let's go and let's just talk about our current capability right now. We have centralized shared workload management, and why it matters, effectively manage jobs and users, prioritization, compliance, and auditing. Saying when you submit a job to the grid middleware will select the most viable compute node for what you're trying to do. Usually that means the one that is least stress at the moment. But that also will change. That it's a little more elaborate than that, a little more elegant than that. We have high availability, and high availability in the tech world means that if one node fails, your work will fall over to another node, or the other nodes are available, et cetera. And so we're not losing capacity. We lose some capacity, but we don't lose functionality. It's just distributed processing, meaning we have job slots which we can use on. You can run parts of your job on all three nodes, and that's improved performance, be changing commands, and we can grow incrementally, meaning all we need to do is add new nodes. And we leverage commodity hardware, which reduces costs, which is near and dear to everyone's heart. And let's look at R for a little bit. Now, in this one, we go back to our process flow, and we come up. Let's go up here, and it's going to be a battle. Come on, up you go. Here we are. This is an example with R. Very simple example. In fact, I will even show you more. Let's bring up a new version of SAS Enterprise Guide. Again, we'll hook up to operations. I click on everything just for demo purpose. But while we're waiting for all that to come in, you'll see this is very simple. And the reason all this is, for example, the first one shows proc IML, and we're just setting up a comparison of matrix. So this is a matrix under proc IML, and this is submitting R code and showing the same matrix. Now, you can only run R under proc IML, but all you really need to have is this submit block. We're saying submit R. And you can only do R on RApp and SAS EM. So if I'm running this one on SAS EM, that's completely compliant. All I need to do is hit run, and here I am. Now, just this, maybe a little bit more elaborate, when this adjudicates itself, it shows that we're busy. So this is how easy it is to run our code. And honestly, I only have 8 minutes, so I may have to curtail that demo a little bit. Let us proceed, and let's talk a little bit about the future. The future is what we're working with now. We have a POC going that's gone very well as far as we've had users involved, what they can use, and we have a few data scientists, and they're very happy to see that you can use SAS Viya and incorporate SAS data, because one is very fluent in SAS and very fluent also in open source. One is very fluent in open source and lightly fluent in SAS, and they're both able to use it, and it enhances both abilities. So SAS Viya architecture is enabled by a wide range of capabilities, and it's an extension of the success of the SAS Grid. In the cloud world, you pay for everything. If you store data up there, and you know the data we deal here, you're talking about terabytes, you're paying for that every second you store it. So our best model is a hybrid model where we do a lot of the ETL and a lot of the work down in the SAS Grid world, and then we can export our result to the data lake to use with SAS Viya, or you can use it with Power BI or whatever other tool is up there. So what I was talking about was how using 9.4 in SAS Viya, it's an enhancement of current strategy. Each is designed to solve different use cases. They coexist very well. Data, models, and code can be accessed directly. In SAS 9.4M7, it's just another data engine. SAS is an enhancement, as you can use Python, Spark, RScale, whatever, and SAS together within one area. SAS can augment open source, increase your productivity, leverage your assets, people, and platforms, bring power to SAS open source, create deployable analytics, and goals to embrace and extend. So it's not either or mutual exclusivity. It is essentially total inclusivity of open source and SAS. You have the power of the SAS infrastructure, which in my mind is superior to Python or anything out there in open source. And then you have the ability to have, SAS being closed source and testing. They don't get some of the newer things out to market as quickly as open source does. So we have the best of both worlds here. And for more information extending R, if you download these, there are a lot of things, videos, YouTube videos. We have blogs, articles, open source integration, node installation cheat sheet, and enterprise miner. And there's information on GitHub, which and I don't see how they can avoid it if we're going to go to the Azure world in research. You can do this now in operations, get to GitHub. How to use GitHub, where SAS is in GitHub, integration with Jupyter Notebooks for all you people who are familiar with Python, sample codes of SAS machine learning, and the best machine learning you can do in a SaaS world, and arguably even in the open source world, is an enterprise miner. But that would be a seminar for another day. I have given seminars on machine learning. I'd be glad to do so and show you open source combined with machine learning. I'm hoping the next one I can do in the Viya world. And so you're seeing machine learning and enterprise miner flow diagrams. Every resource is offered. The VINCI SAS admins offer online training for you or your group, and you just contact us this way. And for specific questions, for example, if you cannot get into VINCI to use SAS, many of those come to us, and sometimes it's as simple as us just logging you out of a disconnected session. But if you really can't get in, we're not the people to talk to. You want to talk to VINCI, put in the ticket to VINCI at va.gov. And in my signature, and I've included here, I have a link to our SharePoint site that has all SAS documentation you'd ever want to see. Both internally, the vast majority was written by Kevin Martin, and he did an excellent job. I've included some things up there, and we include some things from SAS Institute itself. And just click on the link in my signature, and it'll take you to all the available documentation. So good gridding, everyone. Thank you for attending. and just contact the VINCI SAS administrators. And now I can entertain any questions or comments.
Thanks, Mark. We do have a few questions. If you have a couple minutes extra, we could go over. That's okay with you, right?
Please do.
Okay. Attendees, when I close the webinar, please, if you have to leave early, please take a few minutes to answer the questions that pop up. But not wasting any more time, can we use SAS Grid for sample size estimation?
Yes, as you see, you can. There's something for called Proc Survey Select, but as I showed you earlier, if you just go into Data here, and I go to my wizards, and you'll see that it has sampling. Where was sampling at? Which wizard am I in? Yeah, if I just go into Describe, you'll see that we have, not graphs, summary tables, summary. Yes, it does get offer sampling. I think that's up in Data. But please ask your next question while I find it.
The next question, this person asks, how do you release/delete temp SQL tables if created by SAS? Does SAS clean up automatically at end of run?
Yes, once you end your session, the temp tables will disappear. It's the same as your work data. If I end my SAS session, all my work data in SAS disappears, and conversely, all the data up in SQL Server, all your temp tables disappear also. Here's a random sampler right there. It's under Data. Just click Random Sample, and the wizard comes up, just as you did before. You select your data, and just follow the wizards all the way through. It shows you the kind of method, simple. You can just arrow down, unrestricted duplicates allowed, which is unusual, but it happens. And you can just go through and set your random sample up that way.
Thank you.
In the SAS native code, it's Proc Survey Select.
Next question. Can we use our own local instantiation of SAS Enterprise Guide to access SAS Grid resources to which we've been granted access? And they continue, i.e. create a connection profile to the Grid resource without going on to VINCI.
That depends. If you are operations, the answer is probably yes. If you are research, the answer will be no, because the reason VINCI was created was because we wanted to secure data because of all the personal data that is held in the VA and some past data breaches. VINCI was created to reside behind firewalls that you cannot export data out or import data in except through prescribed resources. So if I am on my own desktop, I cannot get into VHA, CDW, DWH, SAS, MD2, because that is behind the VINCI firewall. In fact, I can't even get to GitHub or the Internet behind the VINCI firewall. So the short answer is no.
Great, thank you. This next one asks, when is SAS VIA available, or VIA?
VIA is the correct pronunciation. That, like I said, we went through a POC. We actually just got the depot. We're going to install it and put some project folks up there, and hopefully it's going to come available in the next fiscal year. And as you know, fiscal years in the VA are September to September. So hopefully we get it up there in the next fiscal year. We'll start off with a small footprint, probably allow 25 to 55 users on at a time. But you can do everything you need to do in mostly on SAS Grid. This is for the really hardcore data scientists that want to use Python and R, and you don't even have to use SAS and SAS VIA. You can use pure open source. The advantage of it is the enterprise structure. So we're looking at next fiscal year.
Thank you. Do you expect a monstrous impact with the impending EHR transition?
I wouldn't say monstrous. I would say yes, impact, but it's going to be manageable. We already have it out there under CDW Work 3. is the millennial or not millennial, the EHR data. So that's all out there now. People are currently using it, and as more and more comes on board, we get it through CDW, and that's how the majority of people are going to see it will be through CDW.
Okay, thank you. This one came in close to the end, probably about 10 minutes ago, asking, can you show the last script code again? Not sure if I can give you any more detail.
Script of what? that throws a wide loop saying script.
Okay, well, why don't we just move on to the last question. Can you talk about how to find and use the centrally defined SAS macros and functions?
Yes, what you really want to do, we actually have documentation to it. If you look down here, and let's back up a little bit. If you come down here, the central site, there are a couple papers down there about what's available and how to use it. Now, it's just as simple to use it as we've shown here before when we were doing temp tables. And as you can see, this is an example. Just say ampersand SQL optimal, and that will bring everything up. If I run that, it shows all the parameters. Now, if you come into the site, the documentation site, you'll see everything and anything. There's a huge paper on how to use the stored macros.
That was the last question that we have. Attendees, before I ask Mark to make final comments, I will ask you to, when I close the webinar momentarily, please stick around for a moment and answer the short number of questions that comes up when I do so. So Mark, any closing comments?
I would say that you're looking at what I think really is the best analytical platform on the VA, and we're only going to improve it with SAS Viya. We're probably going to extend this out into the 22nd century. And one of the things that I've heard complaints about is all the silos. We have a silo of R, a very small silo of Python, which is difficult to use in VINCI, a large silo of SAS, and why we can have them talk to each other under the grid under PROC IML. I think that we're going to see a far improved environment, a truly modern environment with the SAS Grid and combined with SAS Viya. And I think you're going to see people who have never used SAS really consume it mightily and really become accustomed to it and enjoy it. And conversely, people who haven't used open source or very late in open source start to use that even more. I think you're really going to get the best of all worlds with a combination of SAS Grid and SAS Viya. And having looked at all the other, and I am not deprecating any of the other ones, but I think as far as pure research and data science is concerned, you're looking at the crown jewel. And we'll all be around to help service you and help you out in that regard. Our SAS administrators group is very skilled in training and understanding the data out there and statistical procedures and modeling. So we are anxiously anticipate this and helping you folks moving forward in your very important and necessary research. And let me close. That's my closing comment.
Thank you, sir. Have a good day, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.